Okay, it's a little bit after 6 o'clock, so, and we do have a quorum, so hello, everyone. Nice to see you again. And let's open the meeting, starting with the minutes of the meeting from October 20. Do we have any questions or comments on these minutes?
I think they're fine.
Okay. Any other comments? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, the minutes have been approved, and we're moving on now to the housing plan. Jennifer will be a few minutes late today to talk about the rental assistance program. So on the housing program, for anyone not on the housing partnership who's just tuning in, this is a plan that's been in the motion for over a year. Originally, it was intended for submission to DHCD to meet the requirements of Massachusetts 40B ordinance. However, in the interim, the town reached safe harbor based on having 1.5% of the land area taken up by affordable housing. What this means is that a developer cannot come in with a 40B development and put it anywhere. The developers must file the local zoning in the town. Larry has been working diligently on this and done quite a job on it, and all members have contributed to it. Larry, I'd like to turn it over to you right now so you can describe the changes that have occurred in the last month.
Thank you, Fred. So there were a lot of changes that were made. Many of them were language changes, updating or changing the data a little bit. So I'm really going to focus on 4 key themes and how they evolved in this current draft. First, there is now a proposed goal of 15% of new housing being long-term affordable. At the last meeting, we had a spirited debate about whether to have a housing production goal that would have Watertown within 5 years at 10% of all of our homes having a long-term affordability restriction. That would be consistent with Chapter 40B, the statutory goal in 40B. This draft proposes a different metric, 15% of new homes having a long-term affordability restriction. This would not be a requirement, but it's an aspiration, and it's a new and realistic way of measuring progress. We wouldn't need a change in the inclusionary zoning rules to achieve or come close to a 15% goal, but we would need to work on creating 1 or 2 affordable developments like St. Joe's Hall. Smaller increments than perhaps you would with just focusing on inclusionary zoning as a part of a market rate development. The second major point is that for the entire time that the housing plan's been in draft, long before I got to join the department, creating a municipal affordable housing trust was something you all talked about. This draft expands on why a trust would be a useful tool. There are over 100 municipalities in the state that have created trusts to engage in real estate activity needed to create affordable housing. The trust can provide seed money to nonprofit developers, provide early funding for a project that's trying to attract federal and state money. The trust would be trying to invest our local resources as leverage to get federal and state resources that would be primarily what funds an affordable project. Third, ever since the beginning of the work you've done on this plan, there's been a priority for more deeply affordable units. And by that, I mean homes that would work for people who are under 60% of area median income. This draft is more explicit about seeking federal and state funding for 100% affordable project for households with those lower incomes. Inclusionary zoning is a very effective way to help those who are somewhere in the 60 to 80% of area median income, because that's generally where the inclusionary units fall, because there's the market rate developers are cross-subsidizing in order to meet the requirement in Watertown of providing affordable housing. But there are many people in Watertown and its surrounding communities that have lower incomes, and they're under tremendous pressure because of rising rents. Fourth, there's increased focus on community engagement. Nothing in our plan will succeed unless there's community support for affordable housing, and the draft makes that very clear. That starts with a community conversation about this plan, and once you're ready, a public hearing to discuss whatever is in the current draft. So those are the four major themes and how they've evolved in the course of the last draft.
Okay. So the plan basically has evolved into a plan of, by, and for the residents of Watertown. Do we have any comments or questions to the plan? I know it's been distributed. All members have a copy as well as been posted.
I do have a comment. I mean, I have a few comments. I have spoken with Larry, and he actually addressed a lot of the issues I raised, which I very much appreciate. I think that the 15% goal is fine, but I also don't think that it's adequate given these, well, the subsidiary goals here. I think the 15% goal addresses goal 1, goal 2. But it's not at all clear to me how the rest of the goals would fit under there. I think there's a serious logical disconnect. And I think that we need to expand that language a bit so that it encompasses not just housing, production of affordable housing units, but something about providing a range of housing options for people in the community, preserving existing housing, and engaging with the community around affordable housing. I think if we do that, it provides an appropriate overall goal or vision of what we would like to see accomplished in the course of this plan. But I think right now, like as I said, it addresses goal 1 and goal 2 very nicely. But if I were to sit down and read this as someone who was just coming to it, I really wouldn't see the connection between goals 3 through 6 to that statement. You know, I do have some other concerns I've raised, but that probably is the major one that I have at this time.
Do we have any follow-up on this?
So Cliff, just to clarify, so the sort of section where Larry kind of speaks to the aspirational goal of 15% of affordable housing for the community, saying that doesn't, it's hard to reconcile that with the sort of the goals 3 through 6. Is that what you're saying? It applies to 1 through 2, but doesn't.
Yeah,
sort of,
yeah. Yeah, I see that statement as providing the overall vision or drive behind what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think it's fine, but I just don't think it's just not clear to me how goals 3 through 6 connect to that. And I think that they really need to do so. And I don't think I think we can add additional wording that would not change or dilute that statement about 15%.
So just suggesting just need some rewording to align better with the goals as they're set out.
Yes, that would be the what I would suggest there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would just say from a document drafting perspective, I definitely support that, the idea of having a statement at the outset that encompasses everything that goes beyond it. And I agree with Cliff, it doesn't have to take out anything or change the 15%, but yeah, a few more, having an overarching goal be more than just 15%. It's, a specific target for new construction, as well as maintaining, as well as focusing on preservation and community engagement, or something as simple as that kind of covers everything. I like that.
Yeah.
Just as a document matter.
I have 2 other comments I would like to make if it's acceptable.
Can we handle this comment first?
Sure. Yeah.
Is there any other input on this first comment?
If I could weigh in on this, I see the logic of what Cliff and David and Helen are all saying. I think that what created the problem is my putting the goal in the introduction to the goals and strategies section, because that then implies, and in fact it says it's an overarching goal. And so that says that it's going to cover everything that follows. I think that it's easier to take that out and put it into goal 1 than it is to create a single statement that is overarching, because the different goals and strategies run the whole waterfront of things that could happen with affordable housing. And I think that we're going to have something that tries to bring everything together in an executive summary. And that is an appropriate place to really try to have everything as a coherent statement. But I think this introduction to the goals and strategies is probably not the place for that. And so what I would suggest, if you all support it, is moving that goal language into goal 1, so that it's clearly only referring to a piece of what is laid out.
Cliff, does that sit well with you?
Well, that certainly would meet, the objection at the moment, but I still do believe that there needs to be an overarching goal or vision here. If I were a town councilor and reading this, I'd want to know just what it is that we're trying to accomplish with this before I'm willing to approve it. And I think that we do need some broad statement about what it is we see this plan doing for the town and why it's important. Maybe that's something Larry can address in an executive summary or an introductory paragraph.
Okay. Are you okay with moving the 15% out of the introduction and into goal 1 strategies?
Well, just to be clear, did you mean sort of into the strategies, or just sort of the intro section with goal 1 are you referring to? Just, you mean to make it a separate sort of strategy, or do you mean as part of the intro where you under goal 1?
I think it could work either way. If others have an opinion about that, be helpful. I'm certainly willing to, or I'm certainly happy to draft a new introduction to the goals and strategies that tries to accomplish what Cliff is suggesting and move the production goal into goal one. The introduction will include reference to the goal, but it would be part of a more general statement about what the plan is trying to accomplish.
Cliff, could you provide a written copy to Larry of what you suggested before, and he can work from that?
I'm sorry, Fred, were you addressing me?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
So
I
how
can
about if
certainly do
you
that.
provide some text for him
Yeah.
to work on that and to draft it?
I can do it. He may already have it. That's fine. I would suggest moving it into the goal one, because everything else, all the individual strategies under goal one are specific actions we can take. Whereas the 15% is more what we're trying to accomplish with those actions, but I think we can work that out.
Okay, now you had some other comments?
I just want to get to the right spot. Excuse me for I just quickly zip through here. I'll tell you which strategy. So it's strategy 4C. I would just note, it says continue to evaluate zoning, parking requirements, and other incentives to shape residential development. There's nothing there that I disagree with. I'm just not sure how it connects to the rest of the plan. I think there may be a bit of a logical connect there. I would note that. And then I think there was one more I wanted to bring up. Oh, I know, strategy 5C. This is actually I think a more important one. 5C says provide emergency funding for critical repairs in existing affordable units. And then it goes on to say, while most affordable units have a sponsor who can make critical repairs, the town should consider an emergency funding program for those who do not. I actually really do object to this. And the reason is that on the only 2 occasions in my years in the board when we have provided funding like this, it's been to the Housing Authority or to Metro West. And in both cases, they had emergency repairs for which they'd been able to identify sources of funds. And I think they may not have ended up needing our money in the end, but without the assurance of receiving funding from us, they would not have been able to move forward on those repairs. And I believe in the case of St. Joseph Hall, the building may have been rendered practically uninhabitable because it involved the elevator. So I think it's fine to say we should provide funding for critical repairs. I would just not limit this to affordable units without a sponsor. So, and I'm not even sure exactly what that means. But I would just say we should have the ability to provide those funds to the affordable housing stock.
I actually thought maybe we can consider striking that section out of there, possibly. 5C. Along with that, but
I mean, it does address preservation. I don't find it problematic in that way. I just find it problematic in that it's limited to a certain subset of affordable units. And I have to be frank, I'm not sure what we mean by units without a sponsor. I don't know if that means perhaps units that were purchased through a home ownership program at some point. I can't really think of anything else. Okay, yeah. Well, I think it's fine to include them, but I think we need to include the Housing Authority and Metro West and any other operator of affordable housing in town. I mean, things break unexpectedly. Funds are not always available when you need them, and buildings can be rendered uninhabitable if we're not careful.
If I may add, perhaps language of just general funding, publicly funded, deep subsidy, something along those lines where it's vague enough where you're just essentially saying any affordable units that require critical repair should have access. 5C, I see what you're saying kind of with the units have a sponsor who can make critical repairs. The sponsor part does seem a little, I think, confusing to the layman. So I would say that if we can kind of keep it, just change the language to, in my opinion, again, publicly funded or deep subsidy affordable units that require emergency funding of some sort. And critical repairs, I think that language is fine because emergency funding is still somewhat broad. You want to make sure it's about the critical repairs, which is often because there's a lack of funding. St. Joseph's Hall, great example. Other developments that we have that I'm thinking of, Willow Park on the east end, where there are critical repairs and we can't do it. Just one example again, boilers at Lexington Gardens, Well McLean boilers are falling apart. They're not honoring the warranty anymore because it's past the life, and you're talking $1 million of 31 buildings of mechanical that's failing, and we can't get $1 million, right? So critical repairs language I think is good.
And Michael, I agree with you. As a layman, that makes complete sense to me.
Further discussion? Larry, can you make that change?
Yes.
I think that's a good pickup. Okay, do we have any other comments, changes?
Are you talking to Cliff or the general to the board?
In general?
Did you have any others, Cliff, that you wanted to run through, or?
Well, I guess one other thing I would just point out, and I'll leave it to other people to decide, but I think in the timetable under goal 4, strategy 4B, leverage funds such as CPA and state sources. And it says this is ongoing, and I'm not really sure I call it ongoing because we haven't accessed CPA funds, and I'm not aware of source state funds that we have access. I would just call it near term. I think it's just more accurate.
Sorry, Cliff, which were you referring to? I didn't quite catch that.
I'm at page 46,
Okay.
goal 4,
Okay.
strategy 4B.
Okay.
I would call that near term rather than ongoing.
4B?
4B, yeah. I suspect that people on the CPA committee might object to the phrase now.
Well, that's a simple correction. Any
I'll stop.
comments on that? Want to make that change, Larry?
Yes.
Yeah, that's so minor.
That's all
Hopefully,
I've got.
hopefully the funding does become available sooner rather than later. And it will become ongoing.
Mhm.
Any other comments?
Talking again to Cliff or to me or anyone?
Anybody?
I'm
Are you all
done.
set, Cliff?
I'm
Anyone
done.
else want to go? So I also had a chance to talk to Larry offline, share some of, give some feedback on the last plan, and Larry's done a great job pulling this together. Before I did that, I actually did go back and listen to the Human Services that Human Services Committee meeting in which I guess Vinny and maybe others Vinny Picciarelli had raised the issue about kind of, I guess, instead of thinking about being constrained by it being a housing production plan, looking at having more of an emphasis or focus or looking through the lens of just being an affordable housing plan. And I to some extent, I think that, I mean, that seems to make sense to me as far as, that this doesn't need to be just a general plan that speaks to housing, but really should be, more of an emphasis and focus, which it is. But to that extent, I think we should, in just a few places, maybe tweak the language to reemphasize that we're talking about affordable housing, or that we're focused on affordable housing, just by tweaking some of the language, or places where it says housing, we should be really perhaps talking about affordable housing rather than just housing. And my second, I would say, just kind of overarching thought would be that, and just from a kind of document drafting, and that I thought there were just a few of the strategies that could sort of be either, sort of folded in to each other, or consolidated or folded into each other, just to, so that'd be you know, a more concise document and just less strategies where didn't necessarily call for separate strategies.
Okay, we've spent the last month sending changes like that back and forth with Larry, and he's incorporated them into the document. Are there any really specific places you want to make a change right now?
Well, there are just a few places where I would just literally use the word affordable, where we're talking about housing, which I can, sort of identify those places in the document. It's like 2 or 3 places.
Mhm.
And then with specifically on the kind of places where I thought might be able to sort of fold in or consolidate. These are ones that are sort of, after speaking with Larry, kind of occurred to me sort of after effect, but I think it's 4B. For example, I think we can kind of just fold, it seemed to me that we could conceivably fold 4B just into the general language of the goal 4, the introduction to goal 4. It didn't necessarily need to be kind of a standalone strategy.
I could go either way with that. Are there other statements?
Sorry, just I zoomed out, now I can't read what I'm saying. And the other, I think it's, going back, I thought 2C was a little bit sort of general, just felt like it could sort of either be, it was sort of encapsulated in some of the other goals and strategies, and just didn't seem to be worthy of sort of a standalone, or the need, not necessarily worthy, but the need for a standalone strategy. But
I think there's actually some value in that one.
what's that?
I think there's some value in that one.
Okay.
That
All right.
stands.
I would agree. I
Okay.
don't see moving that out of there.
Okay.
I'll grant you it's a bit vague as phrase, but I think it does provide an ability to open a doorway to different ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. All right. And on, again, to just sort of put the focus more, the lens on affordability on 4C, just in the actual language of the strategy, where it says continue to evaluate current zoning, parking requirements, and other incentives to shape residential development and increase affordability. Just adding the language and increase affordability, because I think
That would help.
yeah, it might just help the focus again, that it's not just to shape development, but with an eye towards increasing affordability.
Affordability.
I think that's a good idea.
The question I have for the other members, if David were to indicate to Larry just where he wants to change the word housing to affordable housing, would there be any objection with that? We could just go forward and the two of you could do that.
I wouldn't have any objection to that.
Norman, aye?
Anyone else?
No.
No.
Why don't we handle it that way, David? You can
Okay.
just go ahead and go back and forth with Larry and make the changes. It's a good suggestion.
Okay. And I just think I have one last one. Let me just see if I. I think it was 6C. Again, that it could just, again, for document drafting purposes, probably be, I thought it could be folded into 6B, essentially added on, didn't, you know, need to be a separate one, but these are, you know, minor document. That's the one we were talking about, the local preference, but just in general, tacking on the, you know, the effort to, you know, in general with, in terms of for affirmative marketing, improving affirmative marketing, but it could be a standalone one, but just in an effort to kind of.
Affirmative marketing, also best practices are included in that.
Right, but I'm saying sort of fold 6B and 6C together. I suppose they could be standalone, but it just seemed like we could probably, they're sort of,
Mhm.
you know, addressing sort of the same area in terms of the.
Anyone else have a comment on that?
These are not ones that have
It could be
strong
either.
feelings about it. It's just if, just, that was my sense.
And I think it's better to leave them separate. Just because local preference is such a specific thing that, you know, generates a lot of conversations in and of itself. And we could end up with not having local preference or having local preference, but either way, we should, you know, continue to make sure we're at the forefront of marketing, you know, the housing that's out there to whoever, you know, to everyone as much as possible. So I think it's better to keep them separate.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, I just kind of felt like 6C is something, it's sort of like stating something we, you know, it's sort of like goes for everything we do is we want to do best practices.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we could beef
could
it
kinda
up
say
with
that for
some
everything, you know,
examples, that would help.
Mhm.
You know, beef up 6C rather than folding it into something, but
Well, but I see, I mean, yeah, I don't think it doesn't necessarily have to be folded in, but I just felt like something, it's stating something that's part and parcel of what, you know.
I
the
think
town
I
is doing.
really agree with Helen.
Mhm.
Basically, by promoting the lotteries, although we, at least currently, whenever there's affordable housing, we have many applicants for it. This is just another way to advertise what we are doing and telling the public, hey, we're out there, we're working. So
You're talking
I
about-
would prefer
you're
leaving
talking about 6C?
in there.
You're talking about 6C,
Yes.
Fred? All right.
yeah, but I would say I don't have any specific language suggestions, but to the extent that, you know, that 6C could be beefed up a little bit with another sentence about, you know, if there's anything more we can do that we want to strive to do, I think that couldn't hurt. But I don't know exactly what that would be. I would defer to maybe, you know, Larry or Jen or something, you know, something, if there's anything that we're not doing that we want to say we're going to do, this would be where we would put it in.
Larry, do you want to handle that and just beat that up?
Yes.
Is there anything more, David?
I think that's it. I'm just looking at one last one just to make sure. It was 1D. It's just one word. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
If I might suggest, David, perhaps you could communicate with Larry if you have other minor changes in there that, unless you're,
No, that's
Couple
pretty,
words here
except
and
for a couple of one-word,
okay, just communicate with Larry and,
Okay.
I think I speak for all the members, although you can certainly object to it. I don't think any of us are too concerned about a word or two changing in here, as long as it doesn't change the complete intent of the plan. Is that correct?
are you
I
asking me?
agree with you, Fred. Yep.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
So David, if you could do that, just
Sure.
get back to Larry
Yep.
with whatever
Sure,
minor changes you have.
okay. Those are pretty much them that I suggested and
Did anyone else have anything that they think is major that
on the drafting
couldn't
of
be
the
handled that way?
document. Yeah.
Not a comment, Mr. Chair. I was just curious what the general timeline was going to be for submitting this, I know, to public process and the public hearing, and then to revisit it at the next partnership meeting. I was just curious if we're at that point and done taking comments, if you wanted to just discuss the timeline. I wasn't clear on it myself.
Thank you for introducing that. That would be the next thing to talk about. Larry, you want to comment on a couple of dates that you have for a Zoom meeting that would be public?
Yes, I booked December 3 as a special meeting of the partnership. Under the current circumstances, you have to book things in advance to make sure there aren't other meetings that conflict. And so I've done that. That seemed to be a date that worked for all of you. And so the question is, do you feel that this draft is ready enough so that with changes that I make between now and then, that you're ready for it to be the subject of a public hearing?
Comments?
go ahead. I'll go out on a limb and say, yeah, I think we're there. We'll still have the opportunity to change it after the hearing if we identify something ourselves or in response to the comments. But I think this is something we could show the public.
Sure. I mean, if there are wording changes that come up in the public meeting, we could certainly address those as well as any other comments that come up. Are there any other feelings about the public meeting?
Just that we have time for more comments, just like you said. I think we're confident in the changes we're about to make in the language. We have a public hearing coming up where there's going to be more, comments about language and how we can alter things. So I think we're ready because it's spent so much time talking about it. I think it's time to get the public comments and go from there, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
well said.
Larry, can you comment on how you and Steve have discussed that we might handle that public meeting?
Right. So Steve and I think that the best way to proceed is post the full plan in advance, as many days before as we can, and then have a PowerPoint presentation by Steve and I of the contents of it. Fred would open the meeting, he would hand off to us to do the presentation, and then we would take questions and comments from the audience. Steve and I would be there to respond to particular things that needed to be responded to. And then at the end, all of you can make additional comments to close out the hearing.
Anyone like to comment on any of this?
Sounds good.
Okay,
I would just,
Be on December 3rd then?
yes.
Right.
Larry, what time would that be?
I believe that I set it up for 6 p.m. to 3 p.m.
6 p.m.
Yeah.
to 7
to 8.
to 8.
Yes, just to make sure that we had enough time to allow for all of the comments that might come in. I don't expect it to be 2 hours, but I think if you want to be able to be sure, you have to block out time. To clarify what I'm saying, the time that I booked is 2 hours. You can decide to do it 1 hour or an hour and a half. But I just didn't want to be in a position where I booked an hour, there was conflicting meetings, and then we were stuck with less time. So, I mean, I think that an hour is minimum. I think an hour and a half would be fine. And, you know, our recommendation would be somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours. And it's up to you to decide what you want to do.
So,
There's nothing preventing us from ending the meeting at, say, 7 o'clock if we're not receiving any additional comments and we've done everything, is there?
I think that there is, because people might think, well, I have until whatever the ending time is to get on and say something. So I think we have to have a commitment to at least have someone on the entire time to hear the comments and take them down.
Can we extend past the end time? If, well, let's say it was 7:30 and we still have more people, can we run it till 8? Or is that a problem?
I believe that we could do that so long as there isn't a conflicting meeting, because we want to be on the cable system, and you know, that's where we've been getting in trouble with conflicting meetings. We have too many of them, then can't air them. You know, but so far, at least when I booked it, it was the only thing that night, and that may still be true.
I'm sorry, Larry, do you envision that it'll be sort of, say, if we land on, say, anticipate 90 minutes for the public hearing, and then would it sort of similar to the town council when they have a public hearing, then kind of close the public hearing and then have like a legislative session to then discuss the comments that we've heard? Or how do you sort of see it unfolding?
Because there is a partnership meeting coming up, you know, basically 2 weeks after, my thought was that we would just have this as a public hearing, and then between that meeting and the next meeting, I could make some changes and get comments from you, and then we could have a further discussion at the next meeting.
Okay. So really not engaged with the comments, just more just take the public comment and then,
Right.
Okay.
Larry, may I ask, you gave an excellent presentation to the CPA committee. The balance of that was really background information. And I'm wondering what the balance would be in your presentation with Steve at the public hearing. Would it be a lot of background information, or would you delve into the strategies and as well? And what would be the balance between sort of the
Right.
background data versus the strategies?
Right. I think my off the cuff is 1/3 background, 2/3 goals and strategies. I think that really should be the focus of the presentation.
And you would cover
Maybe something about the number of or percentage of households that are burdened in that they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And are you just going to post?
Great background.
Are you going to send maybe copies of the draft to the town council at the same time it gets posted, or in advance of that, or just, I guess I'm just trying to think for a second, whereas the housing, I guess the housing production plan would be something that would be voted on by the council to send it off to whatever DHCD or in this case.
We're not sending it to DHCD.
No, I recognize that. I'm saying, so all that's going to happen is essentially the council will sort of essentially vote to ratify or approve the plan, assuming they ultimately, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that at approximately the time that it's posted would be the appropriate time to send it to council members.
Okay.
And at all points until the members vote that we're happy with it and it's final, everything will be marked as a draft. Is that correct, right?
That's correct.
So that the council knows this is not the final plan. Don't vote on it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So was there a sense of the members as to the length?
I think 90 minutes seems, if there's
I would-
hundreds of people come out of the woodworks, then go beyond that and have a second meeting. But I think that's about the limit of people's Zoom
Yeah.
stamina.
Yeah, they zoom out after an hour and a half. That seems like a reasonable idea. You know, if we're at an hour and a half and there's one or two people left to speak, we can extend the meeting if we're able to. If there's a bunch of people, then maybe we should have a second hearing.
Okay.
We can also ask folks for written comments ahead of time and get some idea what those might be. Anybody who has something very serious to say might give us a written comment.
We should encourage that, I would say.
Mhm.
Good point, Fred.
Yeah.
So basically, we're all on board with the public meeting as it will be slightly amended by some comments from David and perhaps a clip, and then Larry will make those and post it. We'll go forward with the public meeting.
Right. Well, I would amend that in only one respect, Fred. I will have time to redraft, send it out to all of you and solicit further comments from you in writing, and then be ready to post it. And I can also have conversations individually with some of you, like you've covered the possibility that David and I might talk together on some of the things he was interested in, same with Cliff.
And no one's making any drastic changes in this at this time. If for some reason that needs to occur, then we'll have to revisit the whole thing.
Right.
Okay. I'd like to move on to what was scheduled earlier and have Jennifer give us an update on what has occurred with our rental assistance program. Jennifer?
Okay, well, good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me. There may not be a lot more to say than sort of the report I think Larry sent around probably 2 weeks ago, maybe. But I'm also happy to just take questions. So just real quickly, and I apologize, I've got 3 different spreadsheets that I'll be going back and forth between. One real challenge with this work, this emergency rental assistance work, is that we've been building everything on the fly, right? Like we've never done this before and it's temporary. So we haven't invested heavily in designing data input vehicles. So we just kind of slap another spreadsheet together. So we had 52 households submit applications prior to the lottery deadline. And of those 52, 36 have been enrolled in the program. And then 4 continue to be incomplete, so we may be able to get those folks enrolled. 5 were determined ineligible. 2, and this is actually kind of a high number, 2 landlords refused to participate. 1 person withdrew and 4 households submitted applications but have been unresponsive to requests for additional information. So the ineligibles, Mostly were households that had really an inability to show us how they lost income due to COVID-19. They may have well been low income and income eligible, but there wasn't a direct connection between their situation and COVID-19. Since then, we've received 12 additional applications. 4 have been approved. 3 are still in process, and 4 are unresponsive, and 1 is ineligible. So I'm going to pause there and see what questions you might have.
And I have a question about the 2 landlords who said no. I'm very curious, was it because, I mean, each situation is unique, but you think it was because they wanted to evict, they didn't want to accept the money as a way of curing the non-payment? You know, why didn't they take the check?
1 refused to provide their W-9 tax, their tax ID number. And I spoke at length and promised to like burn it when I was done with it, but they just wouldn't give it to me, which is really sad because that's, it's the tenant that's harmed in that situation, really. And then the other one, the landlord felt very strongly that the applicant did not need the money. And there's actually a little bit of rationale to that. However, I did determine that they were eligible, but I can't make the landlord participate. If they don't want to participate, they don't have to, and it's a requirement of the program. So I did speak with her at length, and I explained the situation to the applicant, and the applicant also appealed to the landlord, but they refused. So.
On that note, Jen, can you remind me, what's essentially the language that the landlords are committing to when they do accept the, what is it they sort of agree to do?
Not much. They agree to provide a W-9 form. They agree to receive the funds, and they agree that the information presented is accurate. So the address, the number of bedrooms, and they agree that if they receive funds in excess of the rent, they will return those funds. So that's our cover in case the household has applied for other funds through the RAFT program or some other assistance.
Right. So they don't make any specific commitment as to how they'll apply it, what they'll apply. It's just nothing along those lines.
No.
Your organization's running programs in other communities, similar programs in other communities. Are you running into cases where landlords refuse to participate?
We've had landlords, well, Newton in particular has situations where the tenant maybe is subletting from a tenant, and that tenant may not be willing or able to provide a tax ID. So we did have a few situations in Newton, but they tended to be more complicated situations that did not involve the landlord directly. So
declare income, perhaps. People
I don't know.
Declaring.
Or they may not have even had, I mean, some of these households, I'm guessing, may not have even had Social Security numbers, just based on what I could guess about the family.
All right. All right.
So hard to know exactly. But to have 2 landlords just kind of flat out say no without a sort of complicated situation is a little unusual.
Where does that sort of leave where's the sort of funding right now in terms of the?
So, so we have dispersed to date just about $50,000 and committed. So sort of for the next 2 months, we have about just over 50,000 committed. And then if we also sort of extrapolate our administrative fee, that brings us to about a $56,000 balance, which I expect would serve another 15 households.
Do you still see a lot of ongoing need out there that hasn't been addressed in Watertown?
Well, not really based on the applications we're getting. We are only getting, 1 or 2 a week for the last month, I would say. Now, I know that eviction notices to quit are just starting to really ramp up. So we may get an uptick in the next, in the next month. But as of right now, I mean, there is sufficient funds to fund everybody who we've got.
Relatedly, do we have any sense of what the backlog to raft applications are from Watertown residents?
Don't know what it is for Watertown. I only know what the Globe reported a couple weeks ago, which is that there's 25,000 applications and they've enrolled 5,000. So that's a backlog of 20,000. And that was a couple weeks ago.
And we don't know how many of those are from Watertown, or whether those are being satisfied, or whether there's less demand for this because they're going to raft, or we have absolutely no sense of what that is.
I'm afraid not, no.
And do you think with the opening of the eligibility now, with your participants being eligible, do you see more applications coming, or you don't see that need as much, even with your participants, whether Section 8 project-based or mobile, you don't see them applying for this now that they are sort of, again, eligible to apply?
Well, I didn't know they were eligible to apply. Didn't get that memo.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, but I thought that we had opened, when we do a second round of funding, that there's the possibility of doing the affordable, the Section 8, the public housing, et cetera. I just want to clarify.
If we do a second round of funding, we're still in the first round.
Okay, and so since we're on the tail end of the first round, they're not eligible. Okay, thank you.
Right, yep. I would add to what Jennifer said, 2 things about outreach. Jennifer and I had a conference call with lawyers at Metro West Legal Services and Boston College Legal Clinic who represent tenants from Watertown in eviction cases. And at the time, they had not seen a big uptick in cases. But we discussed with them both the existence of the emergency rental assistance program, sent them flyers so that they would be aware of it and be able to make sure that their lawyers were aware of it for their clients, and also to be in touch with us if they were seeing a significant uptick in Watertown evictions, or at least the filings and proceedings in court. So we hope by making that contact that we can get at the people who are most housing unstable in this round. And then the second thing is that I sent out a mailing to over 100 of the smaller property owners units. We had gotten word out to a number of property owners who had a large number of rental units. We tried to reach down to smaller structures. And, the point of that being that at least they will be aware and their tenants will be aware if things continue to, if there is more need in the next month, 2 months.
Has there been any uptick on in terms of taxes, owners being in arrears or defaulting on their taxes with the town? Do you know?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Mhm. And just with respect to Michael's question, what first round, second round, I'm not sure, what constitutes the second round of,
So the partnership created a program with 175,000
right,
that was designed to serve 40 to 50 households.
right,
The first round. And if there's a second round, we have to have a discussion about what are the resources and how is the program going to be framed? It may be framed differently than the first round was. There are options. Also, there's an option to just continue to support the same people, same households, assuming that they're still eligible. There's also the possibility of going in a different direction to try to hit another gap.
so it wasn't sort of after we exhausted the first round of people and things were trickling off, that we would open it up to WHA tenants or residents?
Could you repeat that? You sort of faded out, David.
Well, I'm sorry, I was saying, the second, it wasn't a matter of after we had gone through the first round of applicants and then now we've had the others that have come in past the deadline at this juncture. If there are any funds remaining, we're saying we're not going to open anything in this 175,000 to WHA residents, or is that what you said?
Yeah, so each of the meetings we've had since you approved this program back in July, we've addressed the issue of opening it up to tenants that have public assistance, rental assistance from other programs. And each time what the partnership has decided is that we're not doing it now. We might do it in the future. We're not foreclosing that, but that we identified a clear area where there was need, and that it's not necessarily that there aren't enough people in Watertown to accept the aid that we're offering. It's that not everyone is in the circumstance where it's acute and they apply, or they may not know about it. So it's not as if we've exhausted the entire pool of people who could respond to what you've created. And so the decision has been each meeting to continue doing what we're doing and then keep open the possibility of a second round where it would be restructured and we change the rules.
Michael, do you have any comment on this? Do you have people that you know of who are in need right now and are in danger of being evicted that are on public assistance?
I was just going to add that, thanks for asking. With the eviction moratorium ending, there are a few families that would be eligible because of loss of income due to COVID, but have been, for many different reasons, unable to gather or keep up even with their basic rent. You know, if they made an adjustment there at minimum rent, we're not seeing issues, but there's a few people that still have income in a household and are struggling to pay. And so there are a handful of households for sure, where perhaps it may make sense, if not December, January, after the holidays, to revisit, if there's money, a second round of funding, and to, even if we're not sort of done with our first round, to David's point, to still consider a second round, because as we're opening up to, you know, Jennifer's participants as well that are in Watertown, you know, Section 8 voucher holders, anybody that was considered in that affordable group that wasn't sort of the initial intention of the first batch, we should consider that sooner rather than perhaps wait for this money to go away. You know, just because the eviction moratorium ended so recently, it's going to happen very quickly. And so the longer we wait, you know, to sort of request that second round of funding, the more at risk some families become.
You want to put that under new business for our next meeting?
If I could just add to that, the first group of people received funds in October. So December, next month, will be their last support. And, you know, in Newton, where they allowed participants to recertify, the overwhelming majority of program participants did recertify because, you know, for a lot of these households, their jobs didn't come back. So I add that to Mike's suggestion that, you know, if we're going to do something, now would be a good time to start trying to figure that out, because January 1, a lot of these folks are going to start falling off the program.
So
Might a lot of these households also qualify for raft?
They might, yep.
But with that backlog, you know, it's a big unknown. And so just on Jen's point, couldn't agree more that it takes a while to process it for her, because just to appreciate Jennifer doing it, and Metro West taking it on, and it's another thing. And so it takes time to process that. So the quicker we can get them funds, the quicker they can get it out. And if people are not getting an increase in their funding, like she says, they have a $1,500 rent payment, $2,500. As soon as this ends, what are they going to do? You know, so.
Yeah, no, I understand. They're in a very difficult position.
back to my original suggestion, suppose we put that as new business and put it on the agenda in December to take up what we may or may not do.
Yeah.
I think that the real issue with doing this is that the money that we're using is monies that were intended for creation of affordable housing. And we certainly don't want, we want to prevent people from being evicted, but by the same token, it might be that there's some other money that could be accessed. Although I don't see what it would be that soon.
Not going to be a CPC Christmas? CPA Christmas?
Nice.
I mean, this is
Okay, Jack,
hard to imagine.
thank you very much.
Sorry.
Great job as usual. Unless there's any more on this, I'd like to move on to the 385, 405 Pleasant Street.
Sure. Can I just ask Jen one thing, unless we need to be in executive session? Any updates on the nuns, so to speak?
Again, David, you faded out.
I said, any update on the purchase, Jen's on the property up by where Jen is? I don't know if you identified it as
Right.
you call it,
Rosary Manor.
what do you call it?
Rosary Drive.
Rosary
Yeah.
Academy.
Any updates on that, or nothing that you can report?
No update. It's still under agreement with another party. Is all I know.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Have a good night, guys.
That'll happen at Christmas time too.
Jennifer, can you stay on for a minute?
Oh, sure.
Before we leave this subject, I think that it would be helpful for me to get some sense from you about what a second round might look like, so that at the next meeting, I will have an opportunity to make some specific options to you. And so, one question is, do you, the original program was structured so that it was trying to target households below 80% of AMI with no real priority for any particular tier there. It also had a certain amount of money for each bedroom configuration. And we're finding that that's covering around 60% of the rent for the households. So one question is, do you feel supportive of trying to continue with the same households and the same kinds of households that were in the first round?
Yes.
I'm not seeing a reason to change it, given the level of demand that we've had. If we had an overwhelming level of demand, then yeah, we maybe should, but I'm not, to prioritize more, but I'm not seeing a need to change. It also doesn't seem like Michael's people, if they come into the program, are going to be needing particularly large amounts of money, given what their rents are likely to be.
Yes. So then the next, I mean, does anyone else want to respond on that first question?
Other than agreeing,
Okay.
no.
The second question is, we discussed the point about housing authority tenants. Do people feel the same way about recipients of other forms of public assistance, of rental assistance?
I would not distinguish between housing authority tenants and people who have Section 8 certificates, mobile vouchers. If we're going to bring one group in, I would allow them all in.
I would not make a difference. So you're talking about very low income, extremely low. It's all below a certain percent AMI that we're talking about here. So it's all relative.
I would say that the counter argument might be that if there is another way in which they can be supported, that would allow us to help people who don't have another alternative.
Yes, my counter to that would be that, again, it's all the more difficult even with the deep subsidy. You know, it's yes, they have access to some sort of assistance, but when you fall in tough times, it's all the more difficult to be able to get together the rents. And so I think that both should be treated equally in my mind.
Okay. Jennifer, do you have any thoughts on this?
Not very compelling ones. I will say that Newton is the only town we're working with that does allow housing authority and Section 8 tenants to apply, and we don't have many. I want to say there's maybe 5 or 6 out of 200. So I do not think it's a floodgate because a lot of those folks were able to get income recertifications and rent adjustments and don't need the program, but not 100% are able to do that for a variety of reasons. So I suspect that even if in Watertown there was that programmatic change, you would not see a huge uptick in it.
I'm sure Michael could give us probably a back of the envelope estimate of.
I disagree wholeheartedly. That I agree that she's spot on. It's not going to be opening of the floodgates. It's most people we work with and we try to do. We're obviously trying to be flexible with the adjustments. There are a handful of households that, you know, our hands are tied for one reason or the other again, and so they would be eligible. And I don't foresee more than, again, 5-6 households that would be eligible. We might have more that apply, but they may not be eligible. So again, 5 or 6 households with no more than 1,000 to at most, 5,000 or something like that. But it's not so small, and we're not talking $250 rents. You're talking about the working families that for one reason or another weren't able to adjust right on time. And so it's not opening a floodgates. I agree with Jen.
Right. If I could just suggest that we not try to formulate a second program at this time, put it on the agenda for the next meeting, because we do have another item on the agenda that we should get to, unless there's a major objection here.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we've covered everything that I wanted to on this. Thanks.
Okay, let's move on then to the phase 2 for 385 and 405 Pleasant Street. We have all received information, although we needed to strain our eyesight to understand it. It looks to my understanding, like the units that we spec that were going to be rental are now being converted, well, the whole building's being converted to condo, and we're being offered those particular units at 80% AMI condos.
Right. So, Fred, as it happens, Steve Collins, who is with the developer, just jumped on. I told him that this was around the time when we would reach them on the agenda. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to have him briefly explain what the owner is proposing to do. Steve?
Hey, hello guys. So yes, so there's 4 buildings in the development. 25 of them are completed. You know, the affordable portion of that is fully occupied. Of the 28 that are left, which are not completed yet, we wanted to convert those to condos, owner occupied instead of rentals, just because of the way the market is going. We're still giving up the affordable portion, still like leaving the affordable portion in place. So, and I think that's about it. You know, I think we meet all the parking requirements.
I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
I think we meet all the parking. Sorry. We meet all the parking requirements and everything like that, so.
Larry, can you
So that's
go
about it.
back and remind us with this project? I'm not quite sure where things stand with the project as a whole. Did we receive some affordable units, you're saying, already for this?
So the VIR was approved for 50 units in multiple buildings. 25 have been substantially completed. My understanding is that they now have temporary COs and are occupied, or at least all 5 of the affordable are occupied there. And then there are a number of the market rate, they're also occupied. Then in these 2 additional buildings, 385 and 405, they're under construction now and should be ready in the spring. Have I correctly stated the situation, Steve?
Yes, pretty much. There's actually, except you said 50 units, there's actually 53 in total.
53, yeah.
So there was a total of how many affordable units that were included in this project?
8.
8, yes.
Yeah. And so 5 of them were in the rental, the buildings that have already been substantially complete, and those 5 have been occupied.
So other than the change of ownership from rentals to condos, have they all been identified? Had we already previously identified the locations of these different units?
Yes.
Yes, there was some, there were allowed to be floating units originally, and I also believe those were in the first phase. Because there was some handicap units that if you know, if somebody come in handicapped or whatever, and we wound up having to give them one of the handicap units, we'd have a floater.
And so I'm coming in late. This doesn't, changing to condos instead of rentals is not changing the amount of affordable housing units at this development at all, right?
No.
And just to be clear, if I can get a clarification, Steve, these are the units that we spec previously for these 2 buildings that would have been rental, but are now just being converted to condo. We're getting the same unit.
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
If that's the case, I don't know if there's really anything to discuss here. I think we would accept the home ownership units instead of the rental units. And as long as there's been no change to the plans of the building, I don't see that this would matter. I mean, I'm assuming that these units will have the same finishes as the other units in the development.
Yes, yeah, and they're, even on the ones that are completed, they're identical. So yeah, everything is the same.
I have no objection to this from what I can hear.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, if the locations are the same and the ones we agreed to, then if it's just a matter of the change from rental to condos, I don't have a problem with it either. But have we confirmed that, Larry, or do we need to confirm
No.
that? I just can't recall.
Yeah, well, we've confirmed it.
Okay.
Larry, I did pick up when David was speaking. It might be useful if the next meeting or before the meeting, if you could just distribute a summary of what we got from this entire project and what's condo and what is a rental unit.
Mhm.
It's all been agreed to before, it's just to summarize it, now that there's been a change. This is the sort of thing I think that we should be reporting to the general public at the end of the year, just a communications issue. Just so that there's no misunderstanding, I think perhaps I should ask for a motion to accept the proposal to give us condo units.
Can I ask you a question? I'm a little confused. So in some, there will be 8 rental units that are affordable. Is that correct?
No,
5 rentals, 3.
So what,
Sorry, Larry, go ahead.
The rentals are what they were agreed to before, is the answer. We're only talking about some condos in these 2 buildings. The 2
Yes.
buildings are going to be rental units. The same units are being converted to condos.
The only thing I might ask is, given that some of them are condos, are there different amenities that are going to apply to different, is there any change up in terms of the amenities?
No, actually, there's not, because there's no really room for amenities. You know, there's no gym or pool or anything like that. So the amenities are the same.
I'm sorry, I remain confused here. So people who occupy these 8 units are paying rent, or do some of them own them? The
So-
affordable-
5 will be
Some will
rental,
own.
3 will be home ownership.
Excuse me?
3 will be home ownership. They will be owned by the people that live in them, but they must be income qualified before they purchase the units.
Okay.
The 5 rental units that are being rented now will remain rental units.
We have other units like this. There, people at 80% AMI are eligible for these units to purchase them. And there's a deed restriction. They need to stay affordable units.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, not hearing more discussion. Do we have a motion to accept these units as they are converted as condos?
I'll submit a motion to accept or approve of the conversion of these to condos at the Pleasant Street condominiums.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, let's vote on this then. Starting with Tori. How do you vote?
I vote in favor.
David,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Ellen?
Yeah.
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Okay, it's been voted and carried. I'll vote affirmative as well.
Great, thank you,
That's-
guys.
That concludes our agenda unless there's any other business to be put on the agenda for the next meeting, including the discussion of a possible phase 2 for rental assistance.
I just had a comment, Larry. I was just following up from the repositioning for the federal public housing for the Housing Authority. I was just curious what subcommittee would be reviewing that. I know it came up at town council recently, but I wasn't sure what subcommittee would be actually reviewing the repositioning.
I don't know, but I'll find out.
Thank you.
Larry, thanks again for all your work getting this thing
Welcome.
down the road towards the finish line. We're gonna need a motion to adjourn, or
Yes, let's go for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're
Aye.
adjourned.
Okay. Good evening,
you.
everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
next time.
Yep.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.